Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello everyone, we are from group 3 and now we are going to present our presentation about creating test item based on Bloom's taxonomy. And before that, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Afiliani, Hanif, Salma, and my friend.
My name is Afrian, Frizky, Alanda.
Okay, let's next to the topic. First is about understanding Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy. Taxonomy can be described as a relationship between father and son who are in the hierarchical structure that is connected to one another. Taxonomy is a framework for classifying statements that are used to predict student ability to learn as a result of learned activities. Bloom's taxonomy has influenced education both directly and indirectly in curriculum development, instructional design, and teacher education. In Bloom's taxonomy has three domains, including the cognitive domain, that is content behavior that emphasize intellectual aspects such as knowledge, understanding, and thinking skill. And for the affective domain, this domain is related to the development of feeling, attitude, value, and emotion. And for the psychomotor domain, this is domain related to the manipulative activities or motor skill. Psychomotor indicators are student behavior that expected to appear after students participate in the learning to achieve predetermined competencies. So this is the between the old version and the new version. If in the old version there are 6 cognitive domains in level, there is knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But in the new version, it revised be remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Next is about cognitive level of Bloom taxonomy. First is remember. Remember is the ability to retrieve relevant knowledge from long-term memory. The remember category consists of the cognitive process of recognize and recalling. To assess remember, students were given questions related to the cognitive process of recognizes and recalling. For the keyword in remembering, there are arrange, define, describe, identifies, and etc. And the second is about understanding. Understanding is the ability to formulate the meaning of learning message and be able to communicate term in oral, written, or graphic form. Students understand when they are able to determine the relationship between newly acquired knowledge and their past knowledge. And for the keyword in understanding, there are comprehend, convert, defend, distinguish, estimate, explain, and etc. Next, cognitive level of Bloom taxonomy is applying. Applying is the ability to use procedure to solve problems. Students need practice questions so that the students are trained to know what produce will be used to solve a problem. And for the keyword in applying, there are applies, change, compute, construct, and etc. until solved and used. And for the next cognitive level is analyzing. Analyzing involves the ability to break down a whole into parts and determine how the parts are related to one another or part to the whole. Analysis emphasizes the ability to break down a main element into parts and see the relationship between these parts. And for the keyword in analyzing, there are analyze, break down, compare, contrast, diagram, reconstruct, differentiates, and etc. until separates. Next cognitive level is evaluating. Evaluating includes the ability to form an opinion about something or several things, along with accountability for that opinion based on certain criteria. The existence of this ability is expressed by giving an assessment of something. And for the keyword, there are categorize, combines, compiles, compose, create, devise, design, and etc. until tells and writes. And for the last cognitive level of Bloom taxonomy, there is creating. Creating is defined a generalizing of a, a new idea, product, or new perspective of an event. Create here is defined as putting several elements in a comprehensive unit so that they are formed in a coherent or functional form. Students are said to be able to creative if they can make a new product by remodeling some element or parts into shape or structures that have not been explained by the teacher before. And for the keyword in creating cognitive level is appraise, compares, concludes, contrasts, criticizes, critiques, defend, and etc. until supports. So the difference before and after of the revision Bloom's taxonomy is as follows in this table. So for the C1 in the new version is remembering, C2 is understanding, C3 is applying, C4 analyzing, C5 evaluating, and the last is C6 is for creating. So next is about taxonomy table. In the revised taxonomy, any learning outcomes will be represented in two dimensions, which immediately present the possibility of constructing a new dimension table called a taxonomy table. Dimension of knowledge on the vertical axis of the table, while cognitive process on the horizontal axis. The taxonomy table can help. This is the benefit of taxonomy table. The taxonomy table can help teachers better understand their learning goals, and then with a more complete understanding regarding their learning objective, and teacher can use the table taxonomy to make better decisions about how to teach and assess students within a framework of objective learning. And the last benefit is taxonomy table can help them to determine how well their goal, assessment, and learning fit together. So this is the Bloom taxonomy of cognitive domain revised by Anderson and Cardwell. So Anderson is the student of the Blooms. And this is the knowledge dimension. First is factual knowledge. This knowledge of the basic element of various disciplines or technology or arts so that students have an understand and or be able to solve various problems in the various disciplines of science, technology, arts, and concerns. And the next is metacognitive knowledge. This knowledge of a certain specific processes as well as awareness of their own understanding. The third is conceptual knowledge, the knowledge of the interrelationship between basic elements in a larger or more complex structure in an enabled science, technology, art, and discipline. And the last is about procedural knowledge. This information or knowledge that will help students do something specific related to discipline, certain science or technology or arts. Next, about affective domain and psychomotor domain. In affective domain, there are 5 aspects. That is the receiving or A1. This is refers to the ability to pay attention and respond to appropriate stimulation. For example, is hearing other people's opinion, remember someone's name. And the next is responding or A2. This is one level above acceptance. In this case, students become more effective involved become participant and interest. For the example is participating in a class discussion. The third is value, or we can call as A3. This is refers to value or importance we attach ourselves to certain object of or event with reaction such as accepting, rejecting, or ingrown. For the example is for proposing corporate social responsibility activities in accordance with privilege value and company committees. And the fourth is organizing, or we can call as A4. This is referred to the unification of value. Different attitude that make it more assistant can lead to internal conflict and form an internal value system. For example, is agree to respond to professional ethics, recognizing the need for a balance between freedom and responsibility. And for the last in affective domain is characterization, or we can call as A5. This is referred to a person, character, and life force. Next is about psychomotor domain. There are 5 in psychomotor domain, that is imitation, or we can call as P1. This occurs when students observe a movement, starting to respond similar to what was observed. The next is manipulative, or P2. This emphasizes the development of the ability to follow direction, appearance, choice movement that determine an appearance through practice. The third is determination, or P3, requires greater accuracy, proportion, and certain in appearance. And the fourth is articulation, or P4. This emphasizes the coordination of a series of movement by making the right sequence and achieving the desired or internal consistency between different movements. And the last is experience, or P5, according to the behavior that is displayed with the least amount of physical and psychological energy. This movement is done regularly. Experience is the highest level in the ability of psychomotor domain. The next is about description of capability types in NCTM, and will be explained by Afrian.
Okay, thank you, Salma. I will continue to describe the capabilities types in NCTM. Okay, next. First is the NCTM process standard. NCTM contains 5 process standards, namely, the first is representation, the second is reasoning and proof, the third is communication, and then connection, and the last is problem and solving. First is the representation ability. The mathematical understanding is also one of the goals of each material presented by the teacher, because the teacher is a student's mentor to achieve the expected concept. One of the goals of teaching is so that the knowledge conveyed can be understood by students. Good education is a successful effort to bring students to the goal to be achieved, namely so that the material conveyed is fully understood by students. And then McKenna's opinion states that to understand an object in depth, one must know 5 things. The first is the object itself, and then the relationship with other similar objects, and the relationship with other objects that are not similar, and dual relation with other similar objects, and the last is relation with objects in other theories. Okay, then is according to Maulana, there are several types of understanding according to several experts. The first is Polya. Polya divides comprehension ability into four stages. The first is mechanical understanding, and then inductive understanding, rational understanding, and the last is intuitive understanding. And we also have here the experts. The name is Polatz divides understanding into two types. The first is computational understanding, and the second is functional understanding. And the last expert here is SCAM. SCAM distinguishes two types of understanding. The first is instrumental understanding, and the second is relational understanding. Okay, and then there are several aspects that must be included in the ability to understand. According to Kurniawan, there are 7 aspects that must be included in the ability to understand. The first is interpreting. Interpreting is the ability to interpret an object that begins with the process of changing one representation to another. For example, describing something in our words, interpreting picture with words. And the second is exemplifying. Exemplifying is the ability to provide specific examples of general concepts. And the third is classifying. Classifying is the ability to classify, which occurs when students recognize an example or event into a certain concept. The fourth is summarizing. Summarizing is the ability to summarize, which occurs when students give the impression of single statements that represent the information presented. And then inferring. Inferring or guessing is the ability to find a form of a number of similar example or suspects and objects. The examples is when students are given a number of consecutive numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. And, and then the inferring occurs when students can distinguish the form of a number of one number with previous numbers. And then comparing. Comparing is the ability when student is given the new information and then the students investigates further by correlating the information with knowledge that he is more familiar with. And the last is the explaining. Explaining is the ability when occurs when students can construct and use the cause and effect model of a system. Okay, next. The next is the reasoning and proof abilities. According to Gilar Shaw, what is meant by reasoning is an explanation that shows a link or a relationship between two or more things based on certain reasons and with certain steps to come to a conclusion. And then according to Nico, the reasoning is a thought to be able to produce a conclusion. And in mathematics, a proof is a series of logical arguments that explain the truth of a statement. These arguments can come from the premises of the statement itself, other theorems, definition, and finally from the postulates from which the mathematical system originates. And then the reasoning ability is divided in the two kinds. The first is the inductive reasoning and the second is deductive reasoning. For the first, inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is based more on sensory observation or empirical. In other words, inductive reasoning is the process of drawing conclusion from real individual case into general conclusion. So in the inductive reasoning, the example is the generalization. And then the second is the deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is a way of reasoning by drawing conclusions from phenomena or special attributes for general things. So, deductive reasoning is the process of drawing conclusions from cases that are real, individually, or specifically to general conclusion. And then according to Maulana, indicator in mathematical reasoning abilities is there are 9 indicators. The first is draw logical conclusion. The second, give an explanation using models, facts, characteristics, and relationship. And then estimating the answer and the solution process, using patterns and relationship to analyze mathematical situation, develop and test the conjecture, formulate an example opponent, following the rules of inference, checking the validity of the arguments, develop valid arguments, and the last is develop direct, indirect, and use mathematical notation. I mean induction. And then we have the third abilities of NCTM, that is communication. According to NCTM, communication is a way to share ideas and clarify understanding. Through communication, ideas becomes object of reflection, refinement, discussion, and reform. In this way, the communication process also helps build meaning and permanence for ideas, as well as make them publicly known. And from some of these opinions, it can be concluded that communication skills are basically an essential part of mathematics and mathematics education. Communication is a way to clarify understanding and perpetuate ideas so that they are known to the public. And then, according to Fairmont Department of Education, mathematics mathematical communication involves 3 aspects. The first is using mathematical language accurately and using it to communicate aspects of problem solving. The second is using mathematical representation accurately to communicate problem solving and presenting well-organized and structured problem solving. So communication is to communicate their problem solving. And then the indicator of communication skill, we have 4 here. The first is express opinions, like listen and discuss the issues discussed. The second is asking question when something is not understood. The third is expressing everyday events in mathematical language or symbol. And fourth is read with understanding a written mathematical presentation. And then the fourth is connection abilities. Based on the opinion of the 2 experts, that is Suherman and Widyarti, it can be concluded that the ability of mathematical connection is the ability to connect concepts both interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary and be able to apply them in real life, so that the connection does not only connect between topics in mathematics, but also connects mathematics with various other science and also with life. There are three aspects related to mathematical connection. The first is unification of terms, mathematical process, and mathematical connector. And for the first is the unification of terms. It is such as change, data, and shape that can be used to draw attention to the interrelated nature of mathematics. For example, how can the perimeter of plane shape change when it is transformed? And for the second is mathematical process, include representation, application, problem solving, and reasoning. These four categories of activity will continue as long as a person learns mathematics. And the third is mathematical connectors, is the function, matrix, algorithms, variables, comparison, and the transformation that are mathematical ideas that become links when studying mathematics topic with a wide of spectrum. Okay, and the next is the indicator for the ability of mathematical connection. According to Sartika, there are six indicators. The first is look for a relationship between various representative concepts and procedures. The second is understand the relationship between mathematics topics. The third is using mathematics in other fields of study or daily life. The fourth is understand the equivalent representation of the same concept. The five is find the connection of one procedure to another in an equivalent representation. And the last is using connection between mathematics topics and between mathematics topics and other topics. And the last abilities in the NCTM is problem solving. Basically, problem solving in mathematics aims to assist students in developing their knowledge and skills. Problem solving can develop student critical and creative thinking skills. According to Maulana, problem solving will encourage students to think critically in looking at each problem. Then they try to find answer creatively so that new things are better and more useful for their lives. Then, according to Polya, there are steps in problem solving. The first step is understand the problem. A clear understanding of a problem is important to decide how the appropriate solution and how the answer to the problem. At this type, the provision of heuristic aims to direct students to understand the problem. For this step, several steps are carried out, like state the problem, sketch a figure or something else, determine what to ask, also understanding the existing information. And the second step is planning problem solving. When a problem is understood, then the next step is to think about how to find the answer to the problem. At these steps, the teacher guides students to be able to plan an appropriate solution to solve problem and help students to think about how to solve the problem or develop a method to solve a problem. The steps are make an example and create mathematical model. So here, student can make a mathematical model to solve the problem. And the third is carry out the problem. This step is the main goal of problem solving, which is implementation step of problem solving that has been planned. And the last step is the review the completeness of the troubleshooting. An important solution is re-examined. This is to find out whether the step in the completion and correct, whether the result obtained are in accordance with what's the problem. Okay, the next, according to Maulana, there are several steps that teacher can take in helping students to be able to solve problems. Among others, providing problems in various contexts every day, or even every hour of mathematics lesson. The steps we have 5 here. The first is train student to read problems, ask students about their understanding of the problem, planning a settlement strategy, solve the problem, and the last is the discuss the result. And we have discussed the abilities and the Bloom taxonomy. And now, what is the question of mathematics question according to Bloom taxonomy level, also NCTM abilities? The first question according to Bloom's taxonomy level will explain by Salma. Okay, please Salma.
Okay, thank you, Afrian. So the next is how to create a question according to Bloom's taxonomy levels. The first is question C1 or remembering. For the example of the question is mention the formula of the surface of area cylinders, or mention the formula of volume of cube, and what is the formula for the surface area of a sphere. And the reason is in C1 the brain works in only taking the information that have been remembered in the sum step and write it. To solve the previous question, brain doesn't think but only finding the formulas of surface area of cylinder and the formula volume of a cube. The next is question C2 or understanding. For the example is explain the differences between the volume of cylinder and the surface area of cylinder. And for the reason is in C2, the brain work in taking the information in step and explain it in detail. To solve the previous question, brain will get the information about the volume and the surface area of cylinder together to know the differences between them. The second example in understanding is why 2x squared minus 3x equal to 14 is not a form of linear equation of the variable. And for the reason is the question are in the form of question understand because it requires ability to compare, that is contrast, map, or match. The detecting the equation and the difference between two or more objects, even idea, problem, or situation. In it compare the example that given by the definition of a linear equation to variables. The next question is in situ or applying. And for the example one is what is the volume of cylinder of its radius is 7 centimeters and its height is 10 centimeters. And the reason is in situ, the brain work takes the information in the step and apply that information to solve the problem. To solve the previous problem, after knowing the problem about the volume of cylinder, then students solve the problem by applying the formula of volume of cylinders. And the next example of applying is a block shaped half with 9 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 5 meter height. Inner wall painted at a cost of 50,000 rupiah per meter rectangle. The entire cost of painting the hall is, so this question to solve the problem on the side, student need to choose the formula to use according to procedure. Cast in block material, there is a formula for the surface area of a cuboid and a formula volume of the block, and then connect it with the cost painting. Next example is for question C4 or analyzing. For the example, first is Salma have a tubular bottle. Its height is 50 centimeter and its radius is 10 centimeters. And Salma want to fulfill her bottle with gasoline if the price of gasoline in Pertamini is 10,000 rupiah. And how much the many salts Salma provide? So the reason is in C4, the brain will takes the information in the step and apply that information to solve the problem. But the information is still cannot use to solve the problem, so that it needs the different information to solve the problems. To solve the previous problems, the problem is to finding the amount of money that provided by Salma to fulfill the battle. Then the student needs to know the amount of gasoline that must be both but that have similar volume with the gasoline both. And for the second example, you can see the graph, the figure. And for this reason, the question above are included in analysis category because it demands the ability or organizing that is determine how appropriate element or function in the structure. Analyze X, Y element in relation with the concept of a circle, a square. Next is question C5 or evaluating. For the first example, the reason is the problem demands a decision. The decision is taken after doing draw analysis, and to solve this problem, student must know whether cylinder A and B have the same radius and height. Therefore, student must find the radius of cylinder A and height of cylinder B so that twice cylinders can be compared its size. And for the second example, the answer of this question, student must calculate the volume of each object for later evaluate. That is, consider check the weight, quantity of weather, volume, and sphere connected by volume tab. And for the last example in evaluating, the question above required ability checking is the ability to detect inconsistency or error in the process or product. Determine uh, does a process or product have internal consistency or detect the effectiveness of the procedure as implemented. So the ability to criticizing is detecting inconsistent between product or operation and some external criteria. Determine does a product have consistency externally or assessing the suitability of procedures for a given problems. The next is question C6 or the highest level in Bloom taxonomy, that is creating. For the first example is explain the mathematically there is relationship between the surface area and the volume of cylinder. The reason is the brain is used to think the new things that can use to solve the problems. For example, is differentiating the formula that already exists. And for the second example of creating, the reason is the answer is student must think of something new that can use to solve problem or organize element in the new pattern and related to the concept that previous student studied to determine the element that have not is known, which is R2, which will be used in the formula the volume of the truncated cone. And the next example for creating level is this question, and the reason is why this include in creating level. This question above requires student to creating a product, so this is production. In this, create this of new formula that's suitable for the given condition. Analyze category question, evaluate and create including question that can develop higher order thinking skill. Okay. And the next is about question according to NCTM Abilities, and it will be explained by Afrian.
Okay, Salma. And the next is the question according to NCTM abilities. Okay, next. For the first abilities is the representation ability. The question is the first given x, a, b, c, d, e, function f and g on x is defined fx is equal to a, c, b, d, c, a, d, e, b, and gx is a, d, b, c, c, e, D, B, and E, A. And the students must determine through the arrow diagram of the composition function f circle G. And for B, domain, codomain, and ring of function composition f circle Gx. And the second, if given fx is equal to 4x plus 7 divided by 3x minus 5, where x is not equal to 5 over 3, then determine the value of f inverse x and draw the arrow diagram of f inverse x for x is equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the third is Samantha has 15 books. She puts them in 5 equals group. And how many books are in each group? Write an equation for the problem and draw a picture to show how you solve the problem. So in this question, student must represent the like in the first, student must represent the arrow of diagram, and like in the second also student must present it the arrow of diagram, and for the third is student must to show the picture and writing the equation for the problem. Okay, next. The next is the question about reasoning and proving ability. We have here the first is the probability of even A is denoted by PA is equal to NA divided by NS, which is a positive value. What can you explain about the range of the values for the probability of even A? And the second, an even A has zero probability, then even A is possible. Is the statement true? Explain. The third, a die is thrown in a time. If PA is equal to 1 over 3, then the probability of even A appears on time dice is true. Is the statement true? Explain. And fourth, Icha and Dinda go to same library in 1 week for 5 days. They have an equal chance of going to library on 5 days. In Thursday, Wednesday, and Thursday. What is the probability that they can go to the library on the same day is 0.32. Is this statement true? Give reasons. So here, for question number 1 until number 4, it refers to the student reasoning ability because student must think their thinking of the reasoning whether the question is true or not. And in the 5 question is the proof that 1 plus 2 plus 3 until n is equal to n times n plus 1 divided by 2 for every n element of natural number. In the 5 question is the question about proving ability. Clearly, the question is to prove that the statement is true. Okay, next. The next is about communication ability. You can see in the PPT here, the question of communication ability must uh, must student must communicate the result or the answer of the question in their word, like uh, communicate with symbol and so on. Okay, next. The next is the question of connection ability. You can see here the screen frame and sail cloth of the boat are rectangular. See the figure below. Find the corresponding angles and sides. Investigate whether there is a multiplication factor. Explain why the screen frame and sail cloth are not congruent. So the question about connection ability is the question that connect in the student's real world. So student must connect the problem in the real world into mathematical model and so on. Okay, next. The next is the question about problem and solving ability. You can see here the question is Afrian want to travel from Semarang to Pekalongan as far as 80 kilometers with an average of speed of 60 km per hour. Because there was an urgent need, he had to arrive at Pekalongan 30 minutes earlier. What is Afrian average speed? And here the question also provide the step of Polya problem solving, that are the first, what are the given condition of the problem, and the second, what are the asks of the problem above. Here from point A and B is referred to the first step of Polya, that is understand the problem, and then write down the formula that we'll use on solving the problem above. And this is the step of planning the problem. And for point D, solution to the problem above. It is the refer to carry out the plan. So here, student must solve the problem. And the last is to check your answer and write down the conclusion of the problem. So in the last is the checking step. Okay, next. The next question. Company produce six product with like this rupiah. If all of the company's products are sold in IDR of 5,000 rupiah for one product, determine the maximum profit earned by the company. So here, so five steps to calculate profit. Okay, next, Salma.
Okay, the next is about description of PISA. And PISA or Program for International Student Assessment. PISA aims to measure how far students approaching the end of the compulsory education have acquired some of the knowledge and skill essential for full participation in the knowledge society. PISA surveys are carried out every 3 years in a large number of countries that together make up close to 90% of the world economy. The Directorate for Education of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, manage PISA and draw on the knowledge of its network of international experts. PISA tests 5-year-old students in reading, mathematics, and science, as well as the measuring a wider range of factors including students' interest, attitude, and motivation. And next is the mathematics question in PISA aimed at assessing the capacity of students to draw upon their mathematical competencies to meet the challenge of their current and future daily lives. Mathematics is defined in relation to three dimensions. The first is content of mathematics, which is defined primarily in terms of overarching ideas and only secondarily in relation to circular strain. And the second is the process of mathematics. This is defined by general mathematical competences. And the third is situation in which mathematics is used. And it is the policy of PISA that students should be allowed to use calculator and other tools as they are normally used in school. However, the test questions are chosen so that the use of calculator is not likely to enhance the student performance in the assessment. The next or the last is the grade question according to PISA level, and will be explained by Afrian.
Okay, thank you, Salma. Please next. For the first question, according to the PISA level, the figure beside is a map of Antarctica and estimate the area of Antarctica using the map scale. Show your working out and explain how you made your estimate. You can draw over the map if it helps you with your estimation. Okay, next. The next is this graph shows how the speed of a racing car varies along a flat 3 kilometers track during its second lap. What is the approximate distance from the starting line to the beginning of the longest track section of the track? And the third, where was the lowest speed record during the second lap? Here, the question is refer to the student to thinking to draw, I mean to read the graph that given. So student must use their mathematical literacy to solve this problem. Okay, next. The next is about like mathematical literacy tool, like the previous question. What was the total value in million of Zs of export from Z-Lands in 1998? And the second, what was the value of fruit juice export from Z-Land in 2000? Here, the student given a diagram, also circle diagram, and then student must read the diagram. So each student must use their mathematical literacy to solve this problem. Okay, next. The next is a result of global warming is that the ice of some glaciers is melting. 12 years after the ice disappears, tiny plants called lichen start to grow on the rocks. Each lichen grows approximately in the shape of a circle. The relationship between diameter of the circle and the edge of the lesion can be approximated with the formula t equal to 7 the square root of t minus 12, where t is greater than or equal to 12, where d represents the diameter of the lesion in millimeters and t represents the number of years after the ice has disappeared. The question is using the formula calculate the diameter of lesion 16 years after the ice disappeared. So your calculation. And the second, Anne measured the diameter of some lesion and found it was 35 millimeters. How many years ago did the ice disappear at this spot? Show your calculation. Okay, next. The next is like this. We have the figure here, and which of the figures has the largest area? Explain your reasoning. Describe a method for estimating the area of figure C and describe a method for estimating the perimeter of figure C. Okay, before that, please previous question, previous, nah, here we can conclude that the PISA question uh, refers to the student analyze, provide argument, communicate ideas effective, and when they solve, formulating, interpreting problem with the nature in the various situation. So the level of PISA is like the literacy and analyze and provide argument and communication. So the PISA level is like that. Okay, the next is conclusion. The conclusion, in the creating test item, teacher can develop the test item according to Bloom's taxonomy, NCTM abilities, and PISA level. In the Bloom's taxonomy, there are 6 levels of cognitive domain that are C1 until C6. And based on NCTM, there are 5 abilities that representation, the ability, connection ability, reasoning and proof ability, communication ability, and problem solving ability. And the PISA model is the question that measures the student abilities to analyze, provide argument, and communicate ideas effective when they solve, formulate, and interpret problems mathematics in various situations. So the PISA level is different with the Bloom's taxonomy and NCTM. Okay, I think it's enough for our presentation. We are sorry if we have some mistakes in our presentation. And if you have question, you can ask in the commenter column of our YouTube channel. Also, you can asking in the our discussion forum in the Thursday next day. Okay. Thank you and see you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.